All right, so picture this. It's January 2013, and a second-year quarterback just torched the Green Bay Packers for 444 total yards and two touchdowns in the divisional playoffs. That quarterback, you ask? It's Colin Kaepernick. Fast forward to 2017, and the same player can't even get a backup job in the NFL. So what happened? Did Kaepernick suddenly forget how to play football, or is there something else going on here? Today we're going to analyze his actual performance on the field, not the politics, not the drama, just pure football, because the answer might surprise you. But before we get started, make sure you guys hit like and sub. Any drive up the algorithm will be greatly appreciated. And if you guys want the best NFL content on this platform, then please subscribe to the Twin Beeps channel. And I'm going to see you guys in the video. If you guys were up to date with the news on Colin Kaepernick, well, he was going to have an ESPN documentary, but it was currently shelved by Jimmy Pitaro. And in light of this, I wanted to see what type of football player was Colin Kaepernick, and if he was a good enough QB to actually be in the NFL for longer than he had a chance to. Here's a stat that'll blow your mind. Colin Kaepernick has a higher career passing rating than Eli Manning, Joe Flacco, and Carson Palmer. Three quarterbacks who collectively won a Super Bowl and made millions more than he did. Now, of course, we are talking about a bigger sample size. We're talking about Eli Manning, Joe Flacco, and Carson Palmer. But there was potential there for Colin Kaepernick to be not a Hall of Fame QB, but definitely a notable QB to be talked about for generations. And only in his sophomore season, we know Colin Kaepernick took the 49ers to the Super Bowl. Then the following year in 2013, he took them all the way into the NFC Championship, losing to the eventual Super Bowl winners of that year. But unfortunately, when you take a look into his playoff statistics, they were kind of piss poor. As he played in 6 games, he won 4 of them. So going 4-2, which isn't bad. But I mean, historically, the 49ers during those seasons when they had Colin Kaepernick, they had a pretty incredible defense as they were ranking top 2 in play points allowed, and I think top 5 in yards allowed as well. He had 94 passing completions on 162 attempts in the playoffs, with a 58% exact completion percentage and 1,300 passing yards. 1,300 passing yards isn't bad in 6 games, but he did have 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, which isn't the best, but it also isn't absolutely horrible. He had an 87.3 passer rating, and also had 507 rushing yards on 4 rushing touchdowns, which is a much more notable aspect of his game. A great player to compare him to is Eli Manning, as Eli Manning had double the games played that he did. But if you were to double the games that Colin Kaepernick played, and you would assume that he would keep the same pace, he pretty much would have the same statistics as Eli Manning. But of course would have his rushing yards that Eli Manning would not have. They both have an 87.3 and an 87.4 passer rating in the playoffs. Eli Manning's completion percentage is slightly better, but again, it's pretty much the same thing. And he also has double his passing yards, but again, he also has double his games. So they're pretty much up to par. Of course, Eli Manning was able to win the Super Bowl opposed to Colin Kaepernick as he lost to the Baltimore Ravens. He did have some electrifying games, however, with his most notable playoff performance coming in 2012 NFC Divisional Round against the Green Bay Packers, where he rushed for an NFL playoff record of 181 yards by a quarterback. He also threw for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns in the same game, setting an NFL record for combined passing and rushing yards in a player's first playoff career game. In the Super Bowl that he did participate in his sophomore season, he had a strong performance as well against the Baltimore Ravens, throwing for 302 yards and a touchdown, and also rushing for a touchdown as well. But of course, like I said earlier, the 49ers would ultimately lose that game. Of course, team success does have somewhere in, whenever you're talking about how good a player is. But at the same time, he did have pretty strong performances. It's not like he was underperforming at the time. Despite having an early pick six that game against the Green Bay Packers, the divisional game I was talking about earlier, he would return for a touchdown the next play. So he did show some resilience. And again, we're talking about a rookie and sophomore season quarterback that is just put in a sort of place where it's kind of hard for a rookie to kind of flourish. as you know, he has a lot on his back, and that team is a contending team. He just kind of showed up one day and took Alex Smith's job when he only had a concussion. He would have his best statistical season in passing yards in 2014 that he would ever have because, a few years down the line, he would eventually have to leave the NFL. And we're going to get into some of that. Of course, I don't want to get into too much political stuff right now, but we are going to get into the fact that more than likely he was exiled from the NFL. His QBR was about an 86.4, and he would have 19 passing touchdowns on 10 interceptions. But would have his highest rushing yards of that season compared to his other seasons. So statistically, the 2014 season you could say was a peak of sorts. Of course, he wouldn't have as much touchdowns as he did his prior season, but he would have, quite a bit enough of touchdowns. I mean, it's about the same when you compare him to other QBs of that season or that year. He wasn't really that much of a difference maker when you look in the grand scheme of things. He would have similar seasons to Andy Dalton and Brian Hoyer of that season, respectively, both on the Cincinnati Bengals and Cleveland Browns. They would both have 3,300 yards, around the same as Colin Kaepernick, as well as 19 touchdowns. But Brian Hoyer would only have 12 touchdowns, so I guess he did a little bit worse. But Cleveland Browns always have some issues when it comes to quarterbacks. Andy Dalton would have pretty much a statistically exact same year as Colin Kaepernick, only opposed to their rushing yards, of course. So Colin Kaepernick just added that extra level of play with his running ability that other quarterbacks didn't have, but he was kind of lacking in the passing department. Just not the best passer overall, but at the same time, you could say that he is still roughing around the edges. He's still a young quarterback at the time, and there is some capabilities of introducing him to new weapons on the offense and, flourishing his passing ability, throughout the years. But when you do have a dual threat quarterback, it just adds such a level of, offensive play because, you're never going to be lacking in the rushing department. And when you have a great defense on top of that, which the 49ers did have prior seasons, then it wasn't really too much of a, issue that he didn't pass the ball that well. He wasn't really on the level of Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Tony Romo, and Russell Wilson that year, as well as Drew Brees, just absolutely wiping the floor with everybody in passing yards. And when you get deeper into the numbers as well as the team numbers, they would go 8-8 that season, finishing third in the NFC West. They did not qualify for the playoffs. They were ranked 25th in the league in points, only averaging 19.1 points per game, and were 10th in the league points against, with three averaging 21.3 points against them. So their defense was still there, but it wasn't as good as they used to be, of course, as they were second in the league the year prior in points against. The offense led by Colin Kaepernick struggled significantly as they finished 30th in passing yards per game and 25th in points per game. The offensive line also struggled, allowing a team record of 52 sacks on Colin Kaepernick. So it's really easy to blame Colin Kaepernick here, but at the same time, he was just doing what he could with what he had. Getting sacks 52 times is very mentally tolling, so you could say that if maybe you round out the line and add some additions to the offensive line, maybe give him some more time in the pocket, he would be able to pass the ball a little bit better and not have to rely so much on his legs, as well as the fact that the defense remained finishing fifth in the league in terms of total yards allowed and leading the league in interceptions. So if they would just round out the line, keep Colin Kaepernick happy, not sack 52 times, maybe they could have a better season the next season. Of course, that is exactly what didn't happen. Maybe in a different universe, as in the 2015 season, everything would go downhill for Colin Kaepernick. He would lose his starting position to Blaine Gabbert, a QB that was actually drafted in the same draft class as him and was actually drafted before him. I don't know how he ended up on the 49ers, but he would end up on the 49ers and would actually take the spot of Colin Kaepernick. He would get benched in a poor performance in week 8, having a 27-6 loss to St. Louis Rams, and St. Louis is just so nostalgic. Anyway, Kaepernick had started 47 consecutive regular season games before being benched, And Com Tumsala stated he benched Kaepernick to help him step back and breathe and look at things through a different lens. A sentiment that Kaepernick reportedly just did not understand. He would then, of course, have his career, or not his career, he would have a season ending injury as he had a torn labrum in his left non throwing shoulder that needed surgery. He would also have surgery on his thumb that was actually on his throwing hand. And he also had a number of other surgeries that he had to get done. But in the 9 games that he did play, he would pass for 1,615 yards, throwing 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. He would rush for 256 yards, which isn't great compared to his other seasons, especially with 9 games played. His QB rating was a 78.5, which is just the worst in his career, as well as probably the worst that season for any quarterback. He would just have overall regression in pocket passing, decision making, along with facing significant pressure behind the struggling offensive line, not showing much improvement. The abrupt end to his season combined with his declining play raised questions with Kaepernick's future with the 49ers. His contract situation also added to the uncertainty as his $11.9 million salary for 2016 was not fully guaranteed until April 1st, giving the team an option to potentially release him or trade him. And honestly, if they were to trade him at this point, I think that he probably would have been better off. The team would finish 5-11, and would also see another coach change as Chip Kelly would replace Tom whatever the fuck his name is, John Tomsula. Now, when taking a look at his last season with the 49ers and his last eventual season in the NFL overall, it would be a bad one for the 49ers that they was only going to win 2 games out of 14, having a 2-14 record. Colin Kaepernick would actually, come back into the starting lineup after week 6 because Blaine Gabbert was just playing horrible. They would also fire Coach Chip Kelly, so they've gone through like 4 coaches in the last like 5 years. I'm not even joking. He would play in 12 games. In 2016, he would complete 196 passes for 2,241 passing yards with 16 passing touchdowns and 4 interceptions, which is definitely better than other seasons. Of course, not having as much as other seasons, but a 16-4 ratio on only 12 games compared to other seasons, even the seasons where he would play 16 games. That is definitely a statistical jump. And that shows in his QBR as he would have a 90.7, the best overall QBR that he would have ever in his entire NFL career. And he also continued to be a rushing threat, adding 468 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns alongside his passing statistics. Of course, this was the season where he would eventually kneel to the national anthem, just trying to protest and raise awareness about racial injustice and police brutality. Of course, he was just ahead of his time, as athletes would do this now regularly. His actions would generate significant media attention and sparked a wider debate about athletes' roles in social justice movements. And if you want to know my opinion, personally, I believe that honestly, it wasn't a big enough deal to exile him out of the NFL because of this. And the reason why I think he was exiled is because if you compare him to other quarterbacks of that season, his passer rating of 90.7 was respectable and better than some full-time starters, and notably better than his fellow 49ers quarterback Blaine Gabbert by a long mile, as well as Kaepernick's interception rate being quite good, as his 4 interceptions in 11 starts resulted in a 4-1 TD interception ratio, which was among the best in the league that season, better than top quarterbacks like Alex Smith and comparable to Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan. In fact, Kaepernick ranked second in NFL history in lowest career interception percentage, only behind Aaron Rodgers. And of course, we can't end the video without speaking on Kaepernick's, significant rushing threat with 468 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, like said earlier, comparable to top rushing quarterbacks like Tyrod Taylor. And all these quarterbacks that I said kept their starting jobs. And if they didn't keep their starting jobs, they would flourish in the NFL as backup quarterbacks for many, many years. But of course, Colin Kaepernick did not get that luxury, as he would never sign with an NFL team again. He would attempt to with workouts. He would attempt to with reaching out to certain teams to go work out with them, as well as trying to have a workout with all 32 teams. But of course, that would lead to nothing. in my personal opinion on Colin Kaepernick was that he was a quarterback that was put in a good situation at first. He was able to have some good playoff success in his earlier years. Of course, the 49ers would dwindle, and he would dwindle alongside of them, but he also would have statistical categories that, would lead him into having at least another contract. But because of the fact that he wanted to step into something that he cared about, which was racial injustice and social injustice, the NFL just did not like him because of that fact, especially with their respect to military families and the national anthem and all that stuff. It was just ahead of his time. And in my personal opinion, I believe that if he wasn't, going to be a starting quarterback, I believe that he at least deserved a little $1 million contract to be a backup quarterback for, any team that needed some sort of a rushing threat in a quarterback. Maybe like a wildcat formation. I don't know. I know that there were some NFL teams that could have used him at that time. But let me know what you guys think. And let me know if you guys think that Colin Kaepernick deserved a contract and deserved to play a couple of more years in the NFL. I'm going to see you guys later in the next video. And make sure you guys hit like and sub. I'm going to see y'all later. Bye bye.